Well, welcome to this third session for Unit 500 Leading People, and in this session we're going to investigate further organisational culture. We're going to reinforce the importance of it. We've already talked about that once. Look at how it aligns with individuals and impacts on them and their performance, and then we'll look how it can help in certain situations and how we need to make sure we've got people on board, say for example in change. So the aim for this session is to understand the importance of organisational culture, and we've already started to touch on this. So by the end of this session we should be able to describe different cultures that exist in organisations. We'll add to that because we've already covered that in session 1. We'll analyse internal and external factors that can affect an organisation's culture. Again, we'll be adding to that because we've already talked about that in one of the earlier sessions. We'll explain the effect of organisations' culture could have on individuals and the teams, and we'll analyse the relationship between culture and change in the workplace styles. So first of all then, we'll have a quick recap around what we talked about in session 2 and covering motivation and some other areas, and then we'll just bring back in a little bit for session 1 around culture so that we can move on and look at the real impacts of organisational culture. So at the end of the last session you were asked to watch 2 videos and complete a task. You should have completed your task and submitted it by now, the assignment. Thank you very much. And now I just want to quickly reflect on the 2 videos. If you have to watch them again, you can click on the image on the screen and it will take you through to a link and you can watch them again. But basically, just firstly, and doesn't he look young in that, but Steve Jobs from Apple talking about how to manage people. He talked a lot about self-managing teams and about the leader and manager's role being about communication and gaining consensus. We talked about that in leadership styles. Those people were just leading and the people were managing themselves. He said that people wanted to work not because that it had to be done, but because they wanted the actual things to work. So the whole culture was around getting those things to work, and he said they brought in managed from outside and it hadn't worked. He said because they knew how to manage but not how to do anything, and he wanted people within the organization to be allowed to prove themselves and to do the right thing, and he was looking for leadership, and I think that sort of explains his idea of what the culture was and how they developed it within the organization. I hope you found that interesting. We'll move on to the second one. This was about engaging your team and creating a culture of engagement, linking the 2 things we've been talking to together really, and there is no culture without the employees being engaged. In fact, the culture would be pointless. He talked about people needing to feel it, and I thought that was important, and if they struggle to feel it, we need to help them feel it. He talked about focusing on a sweet spot was his phrase, and that makes finding the difference. And sometimes you may never find that sweet spot with people, but sometimes the fact that you're trying shows that the culture is about trying to assist those people and trying to bring them in. It shows that you've taken the time for them as individualized, you've empathized with them, and you've taken a bit of thought about it, and you'll get that back from those people. So that's a refresher of those things. We talked about in the actual session 1, we talked about organisational culture. So let's just recap on that. We tried to identify what organisational culture was, and that was Sheen's academic sort of visualization, words, what he believed it was, and we talked about how he said it was split into 3 levels: the visible, the things we can see that they're promoted, the espoused or adopted ideas, and then the underlying assumptions, the things that were just going on in the background. We discussed one of the common theories behind it, Handy's culture types. He talked about a power culture, a role culture, a task culture, and a person-centered culture. We examined the external and internal factors. There was a lot more to them, but it just sort of showed us that there are external factors which you don't have so much control over, and internal factors which you do have control over, and we'll be looking at those in a bit more detail and how they can impact on the organizational culture. Right then, so let's look at a little more at organizational culture and what makes it, and then we can look at what impact it has on the team or the individuals within it. In the video you watched in session 1, 5 levels of leadership, John Maxwell, he went through his 5 levels and he loosely touched on the impact of leadership has on culture and performance. When he was talking about his levels, he was talking about a level 1 culture. I think he was jokingly talking about people being on the starting blocks at 4:45, ready to go home, and people just doing things for the leader because he had the power. So a power or role culture, not because they believed in him or her or it, not because they wanted to do a good job for the organization, not because they believed in its mission or its values. And we're using words there such as missions and values. There's lots of things that go hand in hand to create a culture. The list of things that contribute to a culture is exhaustive, and some are coming up on the screen now, and I'm not saying that's the full list, but organizational culture and values go hand in hand. And values really could be described as the sort of compass. What's right, what looks right, and what feels right. But it's important that they align with the vision and the actions that are being taken in the organization and people's beliefs, and that they all go together, because the organization has actions and impacts on both internal and external people, and their perceptions, beliefs or experiences are really important. Many value statements that companies write all end up being about external values, the external view, and they sound good. Putting customers first, words like ethical or integrity are often included, and they all sound great, and they are all meaningful, but if they're not backed up by actions within the company's leadership and management, both internally and externally, then they're pointless. If employees don't feel that the organization's management are living up to the statements that have been made, then it can have a dramatic impact on the employees, both individually and teams, because ultimately they're all internal customers, and if their staff are impacted internally, then the outputs to the customers will be affected. So we've got a list there of things that can contribute, go towards creating and influencing an organization's culture. By no way exhaustive, and they may not all be relevant, but it's a case of looking at them all. And there's a handout in the resources that gives a bit more details on what they mean, just a sort of overview. So let's move on, look at the impact on teams and individuals, looking at some specific organizations. We all recognize the organization IKEA, and we're going to watch a clip from their website, and remember, we're not thinking about the organization and their products and their furniture, and what we think about them. We're looking at the impact of the organizational culture on the teams and individuals. So watch the next video, make some notes as you go through about what you think and what your impression is, and we'll have a look at some of those points after you've watched the video.